Hi Daisy Girl Scouts, welcome back. This is the video that accompanies step number 3, which is the brainstorming process. So you should have gone online and found our instruction guide for this badge. And if you've done that, you should have completed step number 1 and step number 2 of your board game design challenge badge, which brings us to this step, step number 3, which is all about brainstorming. And it's this section of your activity guide. So you might be wondering, what does brainstorm mean? What is that? Brainstorm is simply to think of ideas. And this is a very important step in the inventing and engineering process. Inventors and engineers always brainstorm their ideas before they create the product that they're creating. So in order for us to brainstorm our board game that we want to design, we have to think of a couple of things. And these questions are outlined in your activity, in your instruction sheet. So the first question is, what will the story and rules of my board game be like? Because every great board game has a fun story and really good rules to follow. Question number 2 is, what will my board game look like? Think of some of your favorite board games to play. What about the design makes you happy, makes you want to play that game, puts a smile on your face? And the third question I want you to think of while you're brainstorming is, what will the characters that move around my board game be like? Another great component in successful board games is having really fun characters. Some of the board games I can think of that have great characters are Clue and Candyland. I love the characters in Candyland. The princes and the lords and the kings, they're just so colorful and they're fun characters and they really draw you into that board game. So those are the questions I want you to think of while you're brainstorming. All you need to brainstorm is a pen or a pencil or markers, crayons, anything you can use to write or draw with. And the first thing I want you to think of when you start brainstorming on your piece of paper or your notebook, or in my case, I have a notepad, the first thing I want you to think of is things that you love. Because obviously, if you're creating a board game, you want it to be based around things that you like, things that intrigue you and that will pull you in and make you want to play the game. So what I did is I listed a bunch of different things that I personally like. Now your list will be different. You can either write the words down or draw pictures. If you don't know how to spell everything, that's absolutely fine. You can get creative. So my first stage of brainstorming was thinking of all the things that I like, things that make me happy. And I like animals, dancing, traveling, food. I love food. It's very important to me. I like camp, puppies and kittens, Girl Scouts, of course, bright, fun colors. I love going to the movies. I love acting in theater, and I love reading books. So these are all things that I personally like to do. Now, I don't think I can incorporate all of these things into my board game. I mean, maybe I could, but that would probably take me like 2 years to design that board game. And I want to keep my first board game that I'm designing short and sweet and simple. So I'm only going to select a couple of these things that I want to include in my board game. And I think some of these ideas that fit the best together are traveling, food, Girl Scouts, and bright colors. So I've selected 4 things that I want to make the theme or the central idea around my board game. I want it to be about traveling. I want to incorporate food somehow, Girl Scouts, of course, and bright colors. I think this will make a fun board game. So the next step that I need to do is brainstorm what I want the actual board to look like. So I decided that I want my board game to be about traveling. So I have put together just a quick sketch of what I think my board game design will look like. So I'm going to use a piece of thick poster board so it's nice and sturdy. And since my game is about travel, I'm going to put the world in the middle. And because I said I want to incorporate fun, bright colors somehow, I decided that the trail that my travelers will travel on is going to be fun, bright colors of the rainbow. And all of these little squiggles little stars represent that I want to decorate my board with as many stickers as I can because I love stickers. They make me happy, they brighten things up, and I have a lot of stickers to get rid of, so I'd love to incorporate them into my board game. So that is what I think my board game might look like. Okay, remember the next question you needed to think about was the characters. What kind of characters do you want in your game? Now, I don't know if you remember, but one of the themes that I wanted to incorporate in my game was the Girl Scouts. And what easier way to incorporate Girl Scouts into this board game than to make all of my characters Girl Scouts? So I have taken each level of Girl Scouts, daisies, brownies, juniors, cadets, seniors, and ambassadors, and I've made them the characters in my game. These are the girls that will travel around my board game, traveling the world. So I've named them Deisha Daisy, Brittany Brownie, Julie Jr., Carmen Cadet, Sasha Sr., and Amelia Ambassador. You can have fun naming your characters after people you know or celebrities. For example, I chose the name Amelia because that's my niece's name, and I wanted to incorporate her in the game because I thought that would be fun. So once you've come up with your characters, you can think of different character traits. Are they friendly? Are some of them villains in your story? Who are these characters and how do they interact with each other? The next thing I need to do, now that I have my board game and my characters, what are the rules so that the characters can interact with the board game? So I've decided that I want to make my rules pretty simple, that the players will pick a character, the youngest player goes first, and they will spin a spinner or roll a counter cube, and they'll move that many spaces across my game board. And whatever space they land on, they have to do what that space tells them to do. So whether that's move forward 2 spaces, or move backwards 3 spaces, or switch spaces with any player on the game board. You get to make up the rules of how you want your characters to interact on the board game. And lastly, I remembered one of the themes that I wanted to include in my game was my 4th theme, food. I can't leave out food. I wanted to incorporate food into my board game. So I think the best way to do that is to make my board game not just traveling around the world, but eating your way through every country you visit. Because when I go traveling, I love trying new food. So I decided that the main goal of my board game was for the characters to travel around the world and eat as much food as possible. And whoever eats the most food at the end of the game wins. So now my last step is to incorporate this food, the missing ingredient, as it were, into this game. So I decided that my board game will include cards, and those cards will have a food item on it. And as you move around the board, you'll collect these food cards, and whoever has the most food cards at the end of the game, or whoever eats the most food at the end of the game, wins. So I designed my food cards based around different countries that I've either traveled to or countries that I'd love to travel to someday, and what foods are popular in those countries. So for example, in England, they like to drink tea. Pizza started in Italy. Japan, they love their ramen noodles, as do I. In Mexico, they invented the taco. In India, they like to eat naan bread. In New Zealand, I decided to feature fairy bread, and if you've never heard of fairy bread before, I hadn't either until a couple of years ago when one of our lifeguards who worked for us out at Camp Timberlane, she was from New Zealand, and she told me all about fairy bread, and that it's very popular in New Zealand. They eat it at kids' birthday parties or fun celebrations, and essentially it's like a piece of white bread with a bunch of fun sprinkles all over it, and she said that they just love it in New Zealand, so I wanted to feature it in my game, even though I've never had it, and I've never been to New Zealand before. And down here on Nicaragua, fried plantains, which are delicious. And last but not least, I almost ran out of room, but I was able to turn my paper over and fit it. In Morocco, they like to eat couscous. So these are all the different foods that I am going to feature on my food cards. So that's my brainstorming process. I have figured out what are the things that I like in my life that I want to incorporate into my game? What do I want my physical board game to look like? What are the kinds of characters that I want wandering around my board? What are the rules, and what are some of the extra features that I want in my board game? The sky is the limit. You can take just a couple of minutes and brainstorm, or you can take a couple of days and brainstorm your ideas. There's no time limit. There's no right or wrong way to brainstorm. As long as you get your ideas onto paper, that way you can eventually take those ideas and design your board game. So that's all for step number 3. Take your time and have fun. And I will see you back here for our next video, which features step number 4, which is all about design. All right, happy brainstorming, daisies.